always been a part of me. Blue as summer sky. Doesn't take a lot to get a girl like me to cry. I've been under stress, and I found that folding in has been what feels the best. Bound up at the roots, tired of telling lies when I can't bear to tell the truth. I've been waiting to bloom. I've been waiting to bloom. I've been waiting to bloom. Waiting to bloom. Sure I'd be found dried out as the dust, desiccated from the energy it takes to trust. I've been waiting to bloom. I've been waiting to bloom. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. My name is Kimaya Diggs. I'm one of the 10 artists that was part of the WBUR Makers series earlier this year. I put out an album, my second album, in March of last year, and tonight I'm just going to play a couple more songs from the album. I lost my mom almost 3 years ago. And I've been performing my whole life, and I felt like a very confident person for my whole life until I lost my mom, and I realized I'd been outsourcing a lot of belief in myself to her, because that's not an easy thing to hold. I thought that I somehow had a superpower where I just believed in myself more than other people did, but really the truth was someone else was doing that for me. And when she died, I realized I had let those muscles atrophy in myself. And I wrote this song thinking about who I was when I still did hold all of my self-confidence and my self-belief. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello, and welcome. I'm WBUR CEO Kimaya Diggs. Give it up for Kimaya Diggs. It feels sublime to be serenaded by you at the start of this bright night. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. As she said, Kimaya was one of WBUR's 2023 makers. We know that Boston is bursting with creative talent, and every year our arts and culture team introduces us to 10 local makers. And there were nearly 300 nominees for this recognition, and I think after hearing Kimaya sing, it's pretty easy to understand how she soared to the top of our list. She graced this stage early last fall for our celebration, and I'm so glad she was able to join us tonight, and I hope you get a little well-deserved food. So, thank you all so much for being here. It actually fills my heart to see CitySpace filled with people who just love WBUR. And I want to say, you all look especially smart tonight, in every sense of the word. This bright night would not be possible without our presenting sponsors, Jim and Kathy Stone. They are so endlessly generous to WBUR and Plymouth Rock Assurance. As we know, there has never been a better time for nice. And that's just so true. And the Plymouth Rock team, you are the definition of nice. We are oh so lucky to have you in our lives. Would you all please wave or stand or whatever make you happy? Can we give it up for the Stones, Plymouth Rock Assurance? We also are lucky enough to have many of our board members here with us tonight, and I just want to express my profound gratitude to all of them. We are so fortunate to have a small army of people who devote their time, their expertise, and their resources to ensure that WBUR continues to thrive. So, members of the board of directors and our community advisory board, I've seen so many of you here tonight. Would you please wave or stand, and let's give a round of applause to them. There's a whole crowd at the back there. They're hanging around together so they can really have fun. You know, I just have to say that my BUR colleagues and I are really galvanized by your commitment to our cause. I'm going to do one last stand-up. Speaking of my colleagues, I would really like to say to everybody who's here that's part of the BUR team, I'd love you to stand too, and I'm even talking about you there in the control room running the show, or you back there at the running the soundboard. Please stand up or wave your hand and let everybody see you. Thank you all so much. You know, I am actually every day in awe of my WBUR colleagues. This is a tough time for journalism. It's a tough time for WBUR, and it's also an especially crucial time for the work that we do, when there's a desperate need for thoughtful, fair, trustworthy coverage, when there is a war on truth, when misinformation and disinformation rule the day, when our country is more fractured than it was even a year ago, and we're just 6 months away from a presidential election, when the war in the Middle East has sparked a war at home and on college campuses in Boston and across the country, when the reality of climate change, I feel like I'm really depressing everybody, when the reality of climate change is inescapable and people want to know what they can possibly do to make a difference. So you turn to NPR and you turn to BUR to help you understand what's unfolding and to get some much needed perspective. And I think you also turn to us because we breathe humanity into your daily lives. We know that life is about more than the worst thing that happened in the world that day. We all need an occasional dash of joy, surprise. We need music and books and art. We need food and fun to round out our days, to feed our curiosity and to occasionally warm our hearts, and to give us reason to hope so that we can get up again tomorrow and do it all over again. There is so much we have to be proud of. Our most ardent fans tell us WBUR is essential in their lives. They say WBUR makes the world a better and more informed place, that we're a lifeline. the news source they trust most. So I ran into a loyal listener this weekend. Hello. Hello. And when she saw me, her eyes welled with tears. Are you going to be okay? She asked. We need you. I need you. And I looked at her and I said, we are going to be okay. I have dedicated my life to journalism in the public interest out of a conviction that the work we do is of vital importance to this city and this country, and we have to find a way to sustain a public good that has been nurtured for more than half a century. I know we will. I am a relentless optimist, but I'm a realist too, and I see very bright days ahead. WBUR, you see them all around this room, you will see them on stage, is brimming with talent and ambition, and we're building a path to the future. But that takes time, and it takes resources. And it's clear that for WBUR to remain strong, we need you, we need everyone in our community to dig as deep as you possibly can. And I know you will rally. So many of you have already rallied. That's why I say with confidence, yes, we will be okay. And I will also say that if any town in America can do this, Boston can. Thank you. And a few more things that you should know. WBUR is thriving in so many ways. We have one of the strongest local newsrooms in America. We've been ranked the #1 news station in Boston for 14 months and counting. Thank you. CitySpace, the very room that we're in, is buzzing with activity many nights a week. WBUR newsletters and podcasts have legions of loyal fans. Our latest show, Beyond All Repair, has soared to #2 on the Apple charts. That's up against zillions of podcasts out there in the universe. It is extraordinary. It is my privilege to introduce tonight's guest of honor, Professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr. I first met him in the 90s, in the early 90s. He'd just written a book called Colored People. And longtime All Things Considered host Robert Siegel and I traveled to his hometown of Piedmont, West Virginia, to spend a day with him. We ultimately produced a long profile about his life growing up in this little mill town. And I have to say, it was one of the most inspiring days of my life as a young field producer. And Professor Gates continues to inspire. His list of accomplishments is a mile long. He is a Harvard professor and director of the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research. He's an Emmy and Peabody Award-winning filmmaker, a literary scholar, a journalist, a cultural critic, and he has written too many books to count. He's here tonight to talk about season 10 of his PBS show, Finding Your Roots, with, and I will say this loud and clear, the incomparable Tiziana Deering. Tiziana and Skip, the floor is yours.
You want to kiss me?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This is going to be fun, isn't it?
I'm ready.
Really, it is. So we're going to jump right in with Finding Your Roots, season 10. It starts in January, right? Themes range from Born to Sing, with singers like Alanis Morissette and Sierra, to Mean Streets with Tracy Morgan and Anthony Ramos. And I think the best way to give people a feel for what you do and really kind of get us started is we're going to do some clips.
That's great.
Great. So we're going to start with 2. Both come from episode 2 of season 10. It's called Forever Young. And the first up is actor Brendan Fraser, who's been around a long time. People might know him from movies like The Mummy or George of the Jungle, if you have kids of a certain age. But last year, he actually won Best Actor Oscar in 2023 for the film The Whale. And here in this clip, you are answering for him why his Irish family ultimately wound up here in the United States.
It's one of the worst famines in history, and your ancestors were right there. Did it ever occur to you that your family was caught up in the potato
I
family.
wondered, I speculated from, what I know of historical events, but
Yeah.
this is why I wanted to come talk to you, because I want to know how they coincide with
Yeah.
the families to give it context. So
That's why you did not grow up in
in
Ireland.
Ireland, they fled the potato family.
They fled and they came here. Your great-great-grandfather Patrick likely crossed the Atlantic with his family. What do you think it was like for him to leave his home behind, knowing he'd likely never see it again?
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It makes me think of how fleetingly childhood goes. Yeah, it hurts my heart.
So I want to do one more, sort of back to back, and this time it's Valerie Bertinelli, actress. She was a teen star, saw some looks of recognition out there, 70s and 80s, One Day at a Time. So Bertinelli, with you, is learning the history of her Italian grandfather, Nazareno, and her grandmother, Angelina Croza.
Appeared Nazareno Bertinelli, bachelor, age 24, and Dominica
Celerani.
Celerani. I have pronounced in the name of the law that they are united in matrimony.
That is, yes.
Dominica.
Uh-huh.
That was, whoa, wait,
Yes.
that's not Angelina.
No.
Dominica.
This is a record of your grandfather marrying a woman named Domenica Celerani on September 14th, 1922, about 2
22.
years after he left the military. This is your first time of hearing of Domenica.
Yeah.
We don't know how Nazareno met his first wife or how they felt about each other. But the relationship would not last long. The next record we found for Valerie's grandfather was the passenger list of a ship bound for New York City.
Nazareno Bertinelli, 24. Married or single? Single. Final destination, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Length of time alien intends to reside in the United States? Always.
Always.
He was fleeing Italy.
Just 1 week after his marriage to Domenica.
Wait!
Just 1 week
What,
after.
1922? What the heck?
That's right. Look at that date.
What is he doing?
Just 1 week after he married Domenica, Nazareno left to immigrate to the United States
Without taking her.
on his own. But that was common. Often, people would go to the United States to make enough money and then send for you.
And send them, okay.
Right.
I'm gonna give him that benefit of the doubt.
Yes, but I want you to read that statement again, and I'll tell
Oh,
you.
he says single.
Single. So that's the
Dude.
first thing we noticed.
So wait. The kicker? 7 months later, a baby. Back in Italy. Right?
That's right.
That's what she finds out next.
That's right.
That kind of discovery can turn a person's world upside down.
Yeah.
So, 10 years you've been doing this. What's the goal?
First of all, let me say it's a great honor to be here.
Or are you just going to jump right in?
No, I love WBUR, and there's a story that I tell. I used to have my alarm set for 7 a.m. and WBUR would go off. So one day, the radio came on to wake me up, and then they were doing a newscast, and it said, and this news just out of the Boston Celtics had met their ownership, and they had decided that the name had been mispronounced all these years because it's properly Celtics, and that they were changing the name of the way that the team was.
I do not know where this is going. I just want to be clear about this.
They were changing the way the team was to be known. And I thought, wow, I live in such an educated town. I am so proud, and I walked around campus. My day job, I teach at Harvard, right? So I'm walking around campus and, have you heard that we're going to be the Celtics?
Oh, God.
And finally, a friend of mine said, hey, Skip. I said, what? And he said, what day is this? I go, It's April Fool's Day. I was stung for half the day by WBUR, so thank you very much for making me look like an idiot in front of all of my students. I have been in love with genealogy since I was 9 years old. I even know the date. My grandfather, Edward St. Lawrence Gates.
Can we put that picture up?
This is my grandfather,
Thanks, Chris.
Edward St. Lawrence Gates. He's typical African-American child, right? My grandfather was so white, we called him Casper behind his back. And the day he was buried on July 2nd, 1960, I was 9 years old. And after he was buried at the Episcopal Cemetery in Cumberland, Maryland, where all the Gateses are from, halfway between Pittsburgh and Washington in the Allegheny Mountains on the Potomac River. I'm just back this weekend, and we can talk about that at the end. And my dad took my brother and me upstairs in his parents' home, and we had never been upstairs. His parents just disappeared magically up the steps at night. You weren't allowed to go upstairs in your grandparents' house. So it was a bit like going to Mars. And he takes us out there was a sun porch off his parents' bedroom. And there was a big armoire, and the armoire was filled with these bank ledgers because my grandfather was a janitor at the First National Bank of Cumberland, Maryland, and he was stealing these bank ledgers. And my brother Paul's an oral surgeon, 5 years older than I am. Compared notes later, we thought it meant that we were rich, and they were dividing up the family fortune, right? But it turns out that my grandfather was stealing these bank ledgers and using them as scrapbooks. And Daddy was on the floor. He had plucked off about 6 of these, and he's furiously turning the pages. And finally, he said, I found one I want to show you. And Rocky and I looked over his shoulder, and it was an obituary. And the obituary was dated January 6th, 1888. And it said, died this day in Cumberland, Maryland, Jane Gates, an estimable colored woman. An estimable colored woman. And then Daddy pulled out a photograph, a sepia photograph, of this odd-looking lady in this nursing outfit. And it turns out she was a midwife. And he said, this is the oldest Gates. This is her obituary. I never want you to forget her face, and I never want you to forget her name. And there was an awkward pause, and then Daddy closed the scrapbook and put all of them in the armoire. Then we drove 25 miles to our home in Piedmont, West Virginia, along the Potomac. It was a paper mill town where my father worked. And the last thing I did before I went to bed, I always had my own bedroom and my own desk and my own bookcase. And I had a red Webster's Dictionary, remember those, the good old days? And the last thing I did before I went to bed was look up the word estimable, because I didn't know what it meant. And the next day, July 3rd, 1960, I went to the colored paper mill picnic. The schools in my county integrated in Brown v. Boards 54, without Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King. Schools in Mineral County, West Virginia, overwhelmingly white. Piedmont, it was Irish-Italian paper mill town. You have good Italian, you know Piemonte.
That's right.
Yeah, but the schools integrated without a peep a year later in 1955, and I started in 1956. But things social were still segregated. So on the way back from the colored mill picnic, I asked Daddy if we'd stop at Red Bull's newsstand. He was of Irish descent. And he bought me a composition book. And that night, on July 3rd, 1960, in front of our 12-inch black and white television set, I interviewed my parents about what only years later I would learn is called your family tree or your genealogy. I made my first family tree when I was 9 years old. And I have been enamored of the idea, the concept of genealogy ever since. 1977, what's the biggest thing happening in the history of television? It was Roots. You could say I had one serious case of Roots envy. You know, when I watched that, I hated Alex Haley. I wanted to be like him. And then in the year 2000, DNA entered my life. A scientist was looking for African-American males to see if they could do roots in a test tube, roots in a laboratory. And I was one of the guinea pigs. And 3 years later, I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and the whole idea of finding your roots just came like a gift from God. And I stood there, and I knew it was a great idea. And I stood there with tears running down my face. And what I've wanted to do is that there are two recurring themes, subliminal themes in finding your roots. One is that we're a nation of immigrants. My African ancestors, I'm 50% European, 50% African. My African ancestors didn't come here willingly, but they came here from someplace else. They were unwilling immigrants. And the other, Jim, is that at the level of the genome, we're all 99.99% the same. Those are two messages that our society needs to hear today ever more urgently, and that's what I'm determined to say.
So there's so much in that, and those last 2 points that you just made, I want to reserve because we're gonna do those. But I want to come back to some of the earlier stuff first, and there's two pieces. When I watched, we've got a screen up here where we can see it in this direction, so we don't have to crane our necks. When I watched that Valerie Bertinelli clip for the first time, I have a large family. And twice...
Maybe larger than you know.
Yeah. Well, this is what I'm about to tell you. Twice in the last 8 years, men in my family have found out about children they didn't know they had.
Wow.
Twice. My brother-in-law and one of my brothers. And one through DNA testing and, oh, fancy that. And the other one, the mom never told the daughter, and the daughter finally in her 30s convinced her mom to tell her who her father was, and she called my brother.
Wow.
And I have seen different trajectories of what that does to a family, to find those things out, right?
Yeah.
And I am so curious, when you've done 10 seasons of this,
Right.
if people are really ready to know who they are. And do they know who they are beforehand?
When they have no idea what they're getting into, really. Because often, most of our audience, we have 4.5 million people who watch Finding Your Roots every week. We're the largest nonfiction series on PBS. And Brendan, you reach a certain point in your life, you're middle age, and you just want to know.
Yeah.
And often it comes when you're losing relatives. You're losing your parents, or for whatever reason, you become aware of your mortality. So having one's ancestry trace, particularly through DNA, allows you to replenish your family in a curious way. One, in the past, you discover ancestors from whom you're descended, with whom you share identical long segments of DNA, just by definition. And two, through DNA cousins, you're able to extend your family horizontally through living people with whom you share a common ancestor that you didn't know, and you hadn't ever met these people before. But often you find out that, as black people say, your daddy ain't your daddy, but your daddy don't know. And right here in Boston, Joe Manganiello, you know Joe Manganiello, I had to tell Joe's a very handsome Italian guy. His father's still living, his father's in Boston. I had to tell him that he has no Italian ancestry. His name is Manganiello, right? And he goes, what are you talking about? I go, you're 25% black. Where'd that come from? His grandmother liked to play the numbers, the predecessor of the lottery.
Yeah.
And she would go every day to the pool hall in the neighborhood. It was owned by 3 black guys. So, you have a smoke a cigarette, you have a drink of scotch, and there you go.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. And you know what? His father, and so I have an ethics protocol that I keep in a file right on my desk. And when I have to call people to tell them about what genealogists call a non-paternity event,
Yeah.
which could take many forms, I have to follow this ethics protocol. I have to say, Joe, we found something in our research that is forever going to change your understanding of your family. Do you want to know or not? Now, theoretically, I've been told there are some people who will say, no, I don't want to know. But that's never happened to me.
Yeah.
They always say, yes, what? Then I say, the man you called your father, or the man, in this case, the man your father called his biological father, had no biological relationship to him. And people go, what are you talking about? And then who he was. And then the reason is because we're not the Jerry Springer show. You know, you can't introduce that to 4.5 million people, including his father, who would be watching at home. And then he has to tell his father in private, and then they have to decide if he's going to stay in the series. And sometimes, several times, people have said no. Usually it is when the parent who strayed, as it were, or was unfaithful, is still alive. And
it's more than one person's story that's going to be told.
Yeah. And it could be very, very embarrassing. Other times, LL Cool J's father shot his mother in the middle of the night, and they had a big argument. When she got out of the hospital, she did the logical thing and divorced this guy and moved in with her parents. And LL, whose name is Todd Smith, he loved his grandparents, and he saw his grandfather as his father, and had even written a memoir saying that. And so I had to call him when Quincy Jones, you know, Rashida Jones, the actor, she was my student. Quincy's a good friend
Parks
of mine.
and Rec, just
Yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
right. And I helped to talk her out of going to Brown. Quincy called me and said, talk her out of going to Brown. She got to go to Harvard, right? And when our mother, Peggy Lipton, and Quincy brought her, my wife and I had the welcome dinner at our house. And then 4 years later, when she graduated, we had the graduation party at our house. But her sister brought Todd Smith along. And, you know, when I got home, my daughter said, Todd Smith is LL Cool J. I go, what's an LL Cool J? And I didn't even know what hip hop and I, you know, I'm an R&B soul man from the late 60s and early 70s. So anyway, I knew him. He always was very polite and called me Dr. Gates. And I said, Todd, there's something I have to tell you. And I said, the people you called your grandparents have no biological relationship to you. Your mother was adopted in 1940. He goes, what are you talking about? He lost his mind. I mean, he cussed me out. Todd's hobby is boxing, and his mother loves boxing. When his first platinum album was "Mama, I'ma Knock You Out,"
Right.
and he's in a boxing ring in the basement of a brownstone, and a little old lady comes down the steps and said, "Todd, take the garbage out." It's very funny. He said, "Well, who's my grandfather?" And I said, he was a world light heavyweight champion of the world. He goes, if I may, you're fucking with me, you're fucking with me, you're fucking with me, you know. And I go, Todd, you know, he goes, you know that's my hobby. I said, Todd, I don't know anything about you, man. Except who your daddy is. We then, he slammed the phone. He goes, well, what am I supposed to do? And I said, if I were you, I'd call your mother.
Yeah.
5 minutes later, my phone rang, and I go, oh my God, this guy's going to cuss me out all over again. And I said, well, he said, Mom wants to know if her father could be her biological father, but her mother not be her biological mother. They had an extraordinarily difficult relationship, a fraught relationship. Why? When she was about 12, one of the aunts had a baby. They're all in the parlor. And Todd's mother said, when I grow up, I want to have a baby that looks just like that. And the evil aunt said, baby, that's not possible. And so that night she went to her mother and said, was I adopted? Her mother said no. She asked her mother 3 times, including on her mother's deathbed. So she had an inkling that she had been adopted. So this was a huge relief for her.
Yeah.
Then the punchline, we found her biological mother living in a nursing home at the age of 88. We called the guardian. It was a 25-year-old college-educated young woman. And we said, your grandmother had a baby when, in 1947. We don't want to kill her with a heart attack, but we would like to connect her or to find out if she wants to, you know, because some people do and some people don't.
Right.
So we said, what are you going to do? She said, I'm going to call my grandma. She said, Grandma, Skip Gates said you had a baby. I go, oh, my God.
So in the end, did everybody get connected?
She said, it wasn't me. I didn't have the baby. My sister did. Then she said, no, it was me. We connected them. They lived happily ever after. Todd Smith and his mother developed a warm and loving relationship. He got a whole new family. He's given speeches about how finding your roots changed his life. It's just an amazing thing.
So you said...
And that lady met her maker without guilt.
Yeah.
You know, think about that, living that lie. I mean, keep for 70 years or something, you know? That's sad.
So there are two things that strike me about that. One, you know, you said the goal is, you know, you fall in love with DNA, and after 2000, you meet a doctor, and he, you know, you're one of the early folks, and then you have this revelation, you want to do this for others.
I'm the most DNA tested black man in the history of the world.
But there is so much more that you are doing, right? You are plumbing the depth of so much more story than is just the family tree. And part of what struck me about that, you know, I watched the show and I read interviews, and you had told Neil Conan of Talk of the Nation the piece about the DNA test for you in 2000, and, you know, having that, and, you know, sort of setting off from there. But before I read that article, Margaret talked about first encountering you after you'd written the book Colored People in 1994.
That was great. That was one of the most wonderful journalistic experiences I've ever had. They came to my hometown, interviewed all my uncles and cousins and stuff. It was great.
Yeah.
It was a great piece.
So I trust Margaret's wisdom, so I read the book.
Uh-huh.
And in the very beginning, we're talking prologue, first line, you have a letter to your daughters.
That's right.
And it starts, Dear Maggie and Liza,
Yeah.
I have written to you because a world into which I was born, a world that nurtured and sustained me, has mysteriously disappeared. My darkest fear is that Piedmont, West Virginia will cease to exist. The town will die, but our people will not move. They will not be moved because for them, Piedmont is life itself.
That's right.
I thought that was why you were doing this. Because we have to know who we truly are, where we truly came from, to bring that history forward with us.
Well, that is, that leads to what I was doing this weekend.
Yes, it does. I found this out at the table, another thing I did not know before like 10 minutes.
No, it's true. I'm just back, exhausted, emotionally exhausted. Because, remember I said that all of this started when my father showed me a picture of Jane Gates. Jane Gates had 5 children. They all looked white. The youngest child was a male named Edward Gates, born in 1857. Jane was born in 1819. She dies in 1888. Edward looked white. And she
Can we put the Edward picture back up? Is that easy to do while you tell this story?
Oh, no, that's my grandfather.
This is the other.
This is my
Edward
grandfather's
before.
grandfather.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
And Edward.
We're going to let this Edward hang out anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, you could see, you could put them up. They probably looked alike. And all she told him was that they all had the same father, and he was white. And she took the secret of his identity to the grave. And since basically 1857, successive generations of Gateses have been arguing about which white man in Cumberland, Maryland was our great-great-grandfather. When I did that first family tree, the box for my great-great-grandfather, Gates, was empty because he was an anonymous white man. The boxes for my great-great-grandparents on my mom's side, and I have the same phenotype as my mom, were both filled in. It took, so I guess you could say that my love of genealogy, in part, has been motivated by trying to find that great-great-grandfather, all right? It took 7 years of research. And C.C. Moore, you can Google her, fabulous profile of her in the New Yorker that talked about how we discovered each other 11 years ago. C.C. Moore, the world's leading genetic genealogist, she has solved over 300 cold cases. And it was her method that was used to solve the Golden State serial killer case. C.C. Moore and our lead genealogist took 7 years. And this Sunday, I sat on a stage before over 100 descendants of Jane Gates and revealed the long-lost identity of my white great-great-grandfather. Man, it was one of the great moments of my life.
Who was he?
He was, I tell you, but I have to kill you. You know, so.
I think Dave would be okay with that, to get the answer.
He was Irish. We knew he was Irish because I have the O'Neill haplotype on my Y DNA. But now I know his name, but I can't tell you until it's going to be the season finale in season 11.
All right. All right.
But I now have a
Okay,
brand
now
new-
wait. How is that for a promo for a show, by the way?
But I now have a whole new family tree, and on the Gates line, it goes back to my 5th great grandfather, who migrated from Ireland long before the Great Famine, the potato famine, who came to Virginia in about 1700. So go figure, huh?
Okay, couple of random fast questions.
Sure.
Those amazing books that you put in front of
The
people.
Book of Life.
Yeah, so, okay, the Book of Life. So Lisa Mullins over there, host of All Things Considered, she and I were talking. She's a huge fan of the show, and she was deeply, say again. Big fan girl, that's right.
Thank you.
Deeply respectful of all the work that your team has to do this research, find all these details, and present it, right? I hear about those bank ledgers, and I see those books.
Right.
Is that a thing?
Yes. There's only one of those bank ledgers left, and I have it in a box case in my study. I flew it in my overhead luggage down to Cumberland, Maryland, and now it's back in my study when I got back on Sunday night. Yeah, that's where I got the idea. But the title Book of Life comes from an old Negro spiritual. Write my name, I'll write my name. Write my name in the Book of Life. Angels in heaven going to write my name. Because I actually believe that our ancestors are in a kind of suspended animation, a genealogical purgatory. And they're waiting for us to find them. And when we find them, we open the vaults in which they've been suspended, and they tell us their story. And curiously enough, often their stories, their secrets, have trickled down through the branches of your family tree and shaped who you were in invisible ways through the culture of your family. So, Freud talked about the return of the repressed, and every family knows about family secrets. The Yoruba people in Nigeria have a proverb that says, the corpse you buried in your backyard last week is poking its toe through the soil today. The return of the repressed. So often, you will find that the patterns that have shaped you, that you're living and you, in fact, are repeating, have been inherited from ancestors too. So it's very cathartic. It's a very cathartic process. And in the case of Valerie, there are deep, dark secrets back there.
Valerie Bertinelli.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and deep, dark secrets. And the case of Niecy Nash.
When did you really know who you were?
Well, tomorrow, next week, I'm 73, and I just learned a whole new branch of a family tree. I learned the identity of a person whose identity has been elusive since 1857. I'm still processing that. I didn't get out of bed till 9:30 this morning because I was exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted. People wept. In a much bigger room than this, people wept. I have 4 generations of dentists in my family. I have 3 generations of doctors, 2 generations of Harvard Law School, including my father's first cousin, graduated from Harvard Law School in 1949. His wife got a PhD, who's black, got a PhD in Comp Lit from Harvard in 1955, the second woman. 2 generations at Princeton, 5 generations at Howard. I come from an amazing family.
Yeah.
An amazing family which obviously had extraordinarily good genes as well as a good, nurturing family culture that privileged and valorized education. So I've always felt special to be a Gates. There's no question about that. But the first member of our family to graduate from a university was my grandfather had 3 sisters. There's a Gates farm in Mineral County, West Virginia, where my father was born. Their parents kept my grandfather on the farm to run the farm and then to go into business with his father. They had a chimney sweep and janitorial business in Cumberland and sent the 3 girls to Howard University. Go figure, how many white families did that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
And their mother voted for La Follette for president, subscribed to W.E.B. Du Bois's Crisis magazine. She was a literate person, and she knew how vulnerable her daughters would be and saw that they were the first college-educated people in our family. 3 young black women, man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's the heritage. And I named my older daughter after that woman, Maud. Maud Fortune Scott Gates.
Can we do one more clip?
Yeah.
And I can do a question
Danielle Brooks.
afterward. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one we're going to do. Last clip, season 10 again, Finding Your Roots. This is episode 7, The Brick Wall Falls, which is focused on breaking, quote, down the barriers imposed by the slave system. So Danielle Brooks, actress and singer. Some of you are going to know her from Orange is the New Black. Others might know her from the musical version of The Color Purple. And you explore her roots on her father's side, tracking the history of her great-grandfather, who died the year she was born. Now, his grandfather was Adolphus, or Dolphin, Duke.
That's right.
1845, Germantown, Shelby, Tennessee is where Dolphin, his nickname, Duke, is from. Kate White, which is crazy, these names Duke and White, that's, I'm guessing, slave names, right? Is born December 25th, Christmas, 1842, in DeSoto County, Mississippi.
So you just met your third great-grandparents who were born before the outbreak of the Civil War.
Wow.
And when you walked in here, did you think we'd get back this far so quickly?
I would, believe you. Yeah, you can do it. If anybody can do it, you can do it.
Great. But you never heard these names before.
Never. I've never heard past Willie Lee Brooks,
Gotcha.
my great-grandfather.
How do you like that name, Dolphin?
I love it. I think it's amazing. I love nicknames. I love it.
Dolphin's unusual name would soon lead us to a painful discovery. The estate records of a Tennessee slave owner named Britton Duke. These records detail how Britton's human property was to be divided up among his heirs, assigning a cash value to each enslaved man, woman, and child, including a boy named Dolphin, who was worth $700.
How do you feel seeing that?
Yeah. That's a big deal. It's a big deal.
You just found out the name of the white man who owned your enslaved ancestor and what he had been valued at in the man's, effectively in his will.
Isn't that crazy?
Isn't that crazy? $700 in 1856 is worth roughly $24,500 today. And he is 11 years old.
Wow.
He's listed as property just like the cows and
I know.
chickens. What do you think that was like?
A lot. I mean, how could you feel like a human when you're treated like that?
So here's what was important to me about that, and to choose that last. Because real storytelling puts power with pain. And there's the pain, but you then gave her the power afterward. I'm going to get a little choked up about this because I think this is what we do in public radio too. What was the power you gave her afterward?
Well, as you heard, he was enslaved in Shelby County, Tennessee, and the Union forces in June 1863 liberated western Tennessee, including Shelby County. So Dolphin was now free. People get confused about the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation, which was of dubious legality, as Lincoln knew anyway, which is why they needed the 13th Amendment. It was the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery, not the Emancipation Proclamation. 13th Amendment ratified December 6th, 1865, long after the Civil War was over. But the provisions of the Emancipation Proclamation were as follows. If the area of the Confederacy was liberated and you were enslaved and you could run away from wherever you were enslaved and get behind Union lines, that meant you were free, all right? And that's what Dolphin did. So, as soon as he could. 500,000 black people did. And many of the men joined the United States colored troops because the Army was segregated. My father was in World War II. The Army was still segregated. He joined the 59th Regiment of the United States colored troops. And in June of 1864, his regiment marched south of Memphis and played a key role in a battle called the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads, a key Union victory that helped secure supply lines for Sherman's famous march to the sea. Dolphin served honorably for the rest of the war, returned home to Memphis, where he married, became a farmer. He grew corn and cotton and fathered at least 7 children. And by the time he passed away in 1898, he had more than 20 grandchildren. You can't beat that for a good story.
No, you can't. And on that, I want to thank you. Preparing for and speaking with you tonight, I thought this was such a perfect match because the power of storytelling is helping us know who we really are. I think it's what we seek to do in public radio. It's clearly what you do, and I'm grateful to you for sharing why and how you do it with us tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. You're fabulous. Give it up. You're a fabulous interviewer. You're fabulous. Thank you.
So stay right there for 1 minute. So Professor Gates, Tiziana Deering, I had high expectations for tonight, and the two of you together, you surpassed every single one of them. Thank you so much. Thank you. Tiziana, you expressed it so beautifully, the power of finding your roots, the power of story, the power of feeling human, the power of curiosity. It is what we do. It is emblematic of everything that we stand for. Thank you so, so much. I just want to turn to the audience and thank all of you. We could not do what we do without all of you. So we know how precious all of your time is. Thank you for spending so much of your time with us tonight and every day of your life. We're going to end the evening just by giving another round of applause to Tiziana Deering and to Professor Gates. I would love all of you to linger a little bit longer. There are 2 wonderful things in the reception hall. First of all, delicious desserts. And everybody knows that food is one of life's most reliable pleasures. And number 2, spices for everybody to take home from our dear friends at Curio Spice. And food is the spice of life, and you make all the difference in our life. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you.